With the holidays in full swing, I imagine that you, like me, will likely have some spare time on your hands. And what better way to spend that time than building a shiny new commander deck? But not all commanders are created equal, so let's talk about the commanders introduced in 2025 that I would actually build. Now before we get too far, I should probably outline what I think makes a good commander. Because to me a great commander isn't simply about being powerful, and my list of commanders definitely isn't a best or strongest of the year list. Don't get me wrong, strength and being competitive is certainly part of my criteria, but I care as much about a commander doing something interesting, unique, or new, and most importantly, that it's fun to play with or against. With that in mind, I've narrowed down a list of just over 20 commanders that I like the most. And for each one, I'm going to share why I think it's cool, what brackets I think it's best suited for, and as a bit of a personal recap for my year, I'll share snippets about my interactions with each of them. So let's talk commanders. And we'll start with Vincent Vengeful Atoner. He is a mono red aggro commander, and he says whenever one or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we put a 1/1 counter on him. Whenever he deals combat damage to an opponent, if his power is 7 or greater, he deals that much damage to each other opponent. Now, I've seen some commentary that red is the weakest color in Magic, and or that aggressive red decks just don't work in Commander. I'm not sure I agree with that, and to me, Vincent is a big middle finger to both of those ideas. His ability to deal collateral damage and evenly damage our opponents, as well as his ability to grow up to 3 1/1 counters per turn, allows him to aggressively close out games. A budget list that I built for Vincent can close out games by turn 5, so he's definitely not weak. I think he can work in bracket 2 if one's building a slower equipment-focused list, but to play him more aggressively, I think he's best suited to bracket 3 and can probably even work in bracket 4. So I built Vincent this year because Critical Role was doing an Australian tour, and I had the idea to make a deck for Matt Mercer, who voices Vincent in the recent Final Fantasy remakes. Matt had previewed Vincent Valentine, so I figured he'd already have built that deck, and I decided to build him a matching red one. I made a video all about that deck, built it, and managed to give it to him while he was here, so mission successful. I'll drop a link to that video, along with any other videos that I mentioned, in the description down below the like button. Next up is Lyse Hext, who is an aggressive Azorius commander. I think she was, and probably still is, a bit of a sleeper powerhouse from the Final Fantasy set. Commanders like Vivi and Y'shtola got all the fanfare, but Lyse has the ability to aggressively remove them from the game long before they come online. She has prowess and reduces the cost of our non-creature spells by 1 colorless mana. Mana rocks effectively become free prowess triggers, and casting a Cartouche Knowledge results in giving her flying, drawing a card, and then giving her +4 commander damage. And that's just the beginning. You've probably already spotted the line here, but to make things even more spicy, if we've cast 2 or more non-creature spells this turn, she gets double strike, throw in some evasion and protection, both of which will likely pump her power and facilitate that double strike, and she gets very silly very fast, all the while being very resilient because of how cheap she makes our protection spells. I think Lyse is way too strong for bracket 2 and is far better off in bracket 3 or maybe even in bracket 4, as I know there are some combo lines with her. While Voltron strategies like the one I described typically struggle at high power, her ability to play lots of cheap counter magic and draw lots of cards should see her hold her own. If you like the sound of that, there's also a video all about her down in the description. But let's move on to Bettor, Ancestor's Voice, who is a 5-mana Abzan dragon. He says that at the beginning of our end step, we put a number of 1/1 counters on up to 1 target creature we control, equal to the amount of life we gain this turn. Then we return up to 1 target creature with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life we lost this turn from our graveyard to the battlefield. So I love any deck that turns something that's generally bad, like losing life, into an upside. And we can fill a Bettor deck with cards that utilize our life as a resource, like one of my favorite black cards in recent years, Ripples of Undeath, and then use that life loss to fuel reanimation. If those reanimated cards then heal us, like our good friend Grey Merchant of Asphodel, even better. I think Bettor fits really well in bracket 2 or 3. He really cemented his place in my brain after a friend built him earlier this year. I tell you, fighting through a Spore Frog and a Boromir in play at the same time is a punishment. It's this addition of white that makes Bettor quite different to playing one of my other all-time favorite reanimation commanders in Merrin. Okay, let's move from a dragon to a Fire Lord with Fire Lord Azula. She is a Grixis combat-focused spellslinger commander. She makes 2 red mana when she attacks, and she copies any spell that we cast while she's attacking. So spell copying is one of the most broken things in Magic, right up there with card draw and having tons of mana. And it turns out that casting a Throw of Possibility and drawing 4 cards, or casting a Seething Song and making 10 mana is pretty damn good. Because she copies any type of spell, Azula can do all sorts of wacky things if we have flash enablers. And that's because most spells, especially those that aren't instants and sorceries, are designed and balanced around them not being copied. If your goal is pure power, then she's probably the strongest combo commander of the year. Her ability to rapidly produce tons of mana, generate incredible amounts of card advantage, and copy both tutors and win conditions can see her turning a single copy of a spell like Mystical Teachings into a win if it's not counted. Because of all this, Azula is probably going to be kill on sight, and for that reason, I don't think she can be played in bracket 2. She's one of those commanders where no matter how you build her, she's probably going to be oppressive, and I think she's much better suited to bracket 3 and especially bracket 4. So this year I started doing commission deck reviews and builds on Coffee, and Azula was requested right after I finished my Zuko build during the Avatar set launch. She was my pick for the best commander from the set, but felt a bit too obvious for me to build, so I chose to challenge myself and build Zuko instead. And ironically, a good friend was actually brewing Azula at the time, which meant I got to steal their homework and then iterate and improve and give them and the person that commissioned the deck back a stronger version. And boy is she strong. There's a video linked in the description if you want that juice. From one type of wizard to another, we've got Kuja Genome Sorcerer. He's a Rakdos spellslinger commander that creates a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token at the end of our turn. He also says that at the end of the turn, if we have 4 or more wizards, we transform him. And he then says, if a wizard we control would deal damage, double it. I think Wizards is one of the coolest but lesser seen typal decks, especially in Rakdos colors. And Kuja makes a fantastic commander for an aggressive Rakdos wizard typal deck that's all about burning the hell out of our opponents. Whether it's triggering a ping assault from our cute but terrifying wizard tokens, or having their big brother Black Waltz number 3 instead dealing 4 damage to each opponent, it makes for a very fiery experience. There's actually a lot of really good cards in this color pairing that fit well with Kuja, like the even more cute Coruscation Mage. Then drop a Harmonic Prodigy and, well, you can do the math. Kuja is pretty explosive, and I think he's probably best played in bracket 3, though you could probably play him in bracket 2 if you're careful about stacking your effects to make sure that you don't win before turn 9. I think it's time to talk about the little guy that probably became Magic's unofficial mascot this year, in Fleem. He is a Grixis flip commander that's either a 1/1 that can't be blocked and connives, or alternatively, when flipped or cast for 4 mana, says that spells from our graveyard cost 2 less to cast. He also says that each non-land card in our graveyard has Mayhem and that the Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. So other than Fleem becoming a bit of an unlikely hero, I'm a sucker for graveyard shenanigans. Turning the downside of discarding cards into an upside by allowing us to cast any cards we've discarded this turn and making them cheaper is a really great upside. There are so many cool ways that one can build Fleem, though most of them will involve plenty of good discard outlets, from All-Stars in one of my pauper decks like Faithless Looting and Highway Robbery, to a star from my homebrew standard deck in Shadow of the Goblin. Given how flexible he is, I think Fleem makes a great commander at pretty much any bracket. But while he could play at bracket 2, introduce some wheels and combos for high power, and I think Fleem can equally be a menace in bracket 3 and 4. The elephant in the room here is that Fleem is not actually a physical card, as the paper printing of him is the Green Goblin, but no one is going to give you a hard time for firing up your printer and printing the superior version. And you know what no one else will give you a hard time about? Liking the video if you're enjoying it and subscribing while you're down there. I cook up videos like this that'll help you think differently about Commander. Videos that will help you build better decks, play better, and have more fun. So if you want more of that, subscribe to make sure that my next banger gets delivered directly into your eyeballs. Back to our banger commanders, let's talk about Hearthhull the Worldseed. Hearthhull is a Jund spacecraft that's giving very strong Zerg vibes from StarCraft, and it has station with 2 different abilities. The first is we can pay 1, tap Hearthhull and sacrifice a land, and then we draw 2 cards and may play an additional land this turn. The second is that whenever we sacrifice land, each opponent loses 2 life. I've toyed with building landfall commanders a few times, but every time I do, I look at the win conditions, get bored, and decide to do something else. There's only so many times you can win with a Scoot Swarm, Rampaging Baloths, or Avenger of Zendikar. Hearthhull gives us a card draw engine that, when coupled with cards that allow us to play lands from our graveyard, can set us up for some very spicy plays. For example, if we have 10 lands in play and a sacrifice outlet, we can tap all of our lands for mana and then sacrifice them all, causing 20 life loss for each opponent. We can then use some of that mana to cast a spell like Splendid Reclamation to get all of our lands back and sacrifice them again, draining our opponents of a further 20 life. Add in a Bloodletter of Aclazots and we don't even have to recur them, or we only need 5 lands to win the game instead. While Hearthhull is certainly capable of high power plays, it doesn't have to be built that way and can be built more incrementally like he was in his precon. So he's just fine to play in bracket 2, but I think he'll really shine in bracket 3. Next up, let's talk about Kefka Court Mage. Kefka is a Grixis Discord commander with a twist. When he enters or attacks, each player discards a card and then we draw a card for each type of card that was discarded this way. So firstly, Kefka has some incredible art, especially on the alt arts. But more importantly, his ability both depletes resources from our opponents and gives us card advantage. What I really like about it though is that we can plan around it and turn that seeming downside of us having to discard into a big upside. Pitching a spell like Deep Analysis and then flashing it back for even more card draw is really good. But what about discarding Chameleon and then paying its mayhem cost and having a second copy of Kefka? While I don't think that flipping him is a core focus, when he does, we draw cards equal to the life our opponents lose during our turn, which is absolutely wild. Kefka is slightly oppressive and very strong, and I would not play him below bracket 3, and I think he is very capable of shining at high power levels in bracket 4 and even CEDH. My playgroup has recently started playing a bunch more bracket 4, and I was lucky enough to pull a Surge foil of Kefka when I opened some Final Fantasy cards earlier this year. So I've already been looking for an excuse to brew him, and I think a high power Kefka deck could just be on the cards. Next up is a commander that I didn't think I'd be talking about this year at all, and that is Lute the Pathfinder. This iteration of Lute is a teemo little guy, and he has 3 exhaust abilities, each of which he can use the turn he comes into play because of his haste. Each one costs 1 mana and can either create 3 mana, draw 3 cards, or deal 3 damage to any target. Anytime a card has an ancestral recall strapped to it, I sit up and pay attention. Like the OG Arcanist the Omnipotent. Creating non-legendary copies of Lute or having cards like Marvin stealing his abilities is a hell of a lot of fun. Flickering him works just as well, and even better if we flicker him in response to removal. He's definitely not the strongest commander of the year, but if you like me enjoy interacting with the game at instant speed, he's a real good time and is surprisingly strong at closing out the game because of his double strike. I think Lute's probably best suited towards bracket 2, but could probably hang out in bracket 3. Now I didn't pay much attention to Lute until I got the chance to pilot him in a commander showdown where I played against Iffy, Gavin and Ruby plays. That experience gave me a new appreciation for him, and I even had Gavin on the ropes, but got hit with a truly problematic volcano, and the rest is history. Speaking of Gavin Verhey, the next commander in this list is also tied to him, and that's Kimahri Valiant Guardian. He is a Simic copy commander, and he says at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put a 1/1 counter on him and tap target creature an opponent controls. Then, we may have Kimahri become a copy of that creature. So Kimahri is a fairly straightforward card. But having a creature copy ability in the command zone is a surprisingly good time and allows you to pile the deck that truly plays a little bit differently each game. Given Kimahri is so flexible, one could build him in many ways, but I think leaning into the copy side of things, and dare I say, Uno reverse the commander deck, I think is the way to go. And I realized how good Kimahri was this year when a friend played against me with Kimahri in the 99. He copied my Sauron, and his Sauron ended up being bigger and more scary and beating me down, with mine being unable to defend. I was sad, but it truly was a banger. I like that Kimahri interaction so much that I ended up building a commander deck for Gavin with Kimahri as the commander. Because what do you get the man who can have anything in the Magic world? Well, you get him a commander that's different every game. Next up, let's talk about Mendicant Core Guidelight, or Aetherdrift Bumblebee. He's an Azorius robot artifact commander, and his power is equal to the number of artifacts we control. And he has starter engines. At max speed, whenever we cast an artifact spell, we may pay 1, and if we do, we copy it. Copying things is absolutely broken in Magic, and it's no different with Mendicant Core. Whether we're copying a humble Cryogen Relic, a Thought Monitor, an equipment like a Nettle Assist, or something much more spicy like a Forsaken Monument or Portal to Phyrexia, copying is broken. I think Mendicant Core can probably be played in any bracket, though the engine starting is a bit of a drawback at bracket 4, and he's probably best suited to bracket 3. We can't talk about one Firelord sibling and not the other, so let's talk about Firelord Zuko. He's a Mardu commander that has Firebending X, where X is his power, which means he makes that much red mana when he attacks. Whenever we cast a spell from exile, or whenever a permanent enters from exile, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. I don't think I can start talking about Zuko without talking about the interaction between him and Norrin the Weary. Yes, that's correct, Norrin will likely trigger Zuko 4 times per turn cycle, and that's 4 1/1 counters on Zuko and every other creature we control, which yeah, is a lot. Instead of a Zuko deck that goes wide and features lots of other creatures and tokens, I was infatuated with a deck that multiplies Zuko's power and uses a big Zuko to make a ton of mana that we use to burninate the table. In either direction though, Zuko is powerful and a lot of fun. I think he can be played in bracket 2 or bracket 3 with great success, but I'd probably not run Norrin in a bracket 2 deck because I think that's a little bit too spicy. Speaking of spicy, if you like the sound of the big mana Zuko, I challenged myself to build my first Mardu deck with him, and you can see how that went in the video linked in the description. Next up, I don't think I can make this kind of video and not talk about Vivi. And I'm sure that almost all of us know what Vivi does, but just in case you don't, Vivi is an Izzet Spellslinger commander. Their first ability makes red and blue mana equal to Vivi's power. and whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we put a 1/1 counter on Vivi and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. There's a sizable part of me that hates that I want to love Vivi, but there is a tragic in me just can't help it. Vivi can obviously make an absolute ton of mana, and one can build him in so many directions given the non-creature spells proc the ability. Whether it's a giant equipment Voltron Vivi, or a Vivi spellslinger deck where you blow up the entire table with an O'Hare-powered Pingstorm, there are all sorts of shenanigans to be had. Vivi is way too strong to be played in bracket 2 and is definitely a bracket 3 and 4 commander. Despite staying away from Vivi for most of the year, I ended up adding them into my Aragorn Spellslinger deck as Vivi does 2 things that I want. They can both ramp and ping the table. Then I drew into a curiosity that was meant for Aragorn, because with Aragorn whenever I cast the red spell, I can ping someone and then draw a card. But then I read Vivi, and I put the curiosity on Vivi instead, and about 3 cheap non-creature spells later and 9 cards drawn, I realized that Vivi had to be on this list. Next up is Hasheton Scarab's Fist. He's an Esper commander from Aetherdrift and everyone loves a 2-mana commander. Even more so when they say that whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 colorless and 1 blue mana, and if you do, you can create a tap token that's a copy of that card except it's a 4/4 black zombie. Reanimation was one of my first loves in the game of Magic, and if we pair Hasheton with any discard outlets, we have a recipe for bringing all manner of scary creatures into play on turn 3 or even turn 2, like a Ginger Taxus, an Elish Norn, a Holbrekara, or a Velguvath. I think you get where I'm going. Hasheton can certainly work in bracket 2 if you're mindful of what powerful creatures you're reanimating, but I think he fits best in bracket 3. Katara Waterbending Master is a mono blue spellslinger commander, and she says that whenever we cast a spell during an opponent's turn, we get an experience counter. Then, whenever she attacks, we may draw a card for each experience counter that we have, and if we do, we discard a card. Now, I like Katara for a bunch of reasons. Firstly, drawing cards is pretty damn strong, and a mono blue deck being incentivized to cast spells on others' turns is just perfect. Katara can very quickly ramp to drawing us a handful of cards or even more, and if she gets blocked, it's not the biggest of deals because she's relatively cheap to cast and the experience counters stick around. Add in some proliferation of the experience counters, and then we're really cooking. I think one can reasonably play Katara at pretty much any bracket, from bracket 2 all the way up to CEDH, but just be aware that if you're playing a counterspell heavy strategy in bracket 2, you may get a little bit of heat. If you like instant speed spells but you also like the color black, then Emet-selch of the 3rd seat might be a better choice. This Dimir antagonist reduces the cost of spells we cast from our graveyard by 2 colorless mana. He also says, whenever 1 or more opponents lose life, we may cast an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard. If it's not abundantly clear from this video already, I'm a bit of a graveyard tragic, and the idea of filling my graveyard with spells and effectively having my hand be 30 cards strong is one hell of a drug. If we fill our deck with controlling spells and a few sources of life loss, we're in for a very good time. What's even more cool is that his ability overrides timing rules, meaning we can cast sorcery spells whenever an opponent loses life. I think Emmet makes for a really solid control commander in bracket 2 or bracket 3. I had my eye on him all year, but I'm in the midst of brewing him for a budget deck building challenge with my friends. If you want that to become a video, hit me with a "I want the sexy graveyard man" in the comments. Next up, let's talk about Ardbert, Warrior of Darkness. He's an Orzhov Legends Matter commander. Whenever we cast a white spell, we put a 1/1 counter on each legendary creature we control, and they gain vigilance until the end of the turn. If we then cast a black spell, we get a 1/1 counter and menace instead. If we have a board of legendary creatures and we cast an Orzhov spell, everything gets 2 1/1 counters and vigilance and menace. That makes our stuff bigger, harder to block, and everything is untapped so we don't get clapped back, which is a very powerful aggressive combo. It also helps that the Orzhov color pairing has an array of cheap, strong legendary creatures to help be a base for that deck. I think Arbert's powerful, but in a fairly linear way that works well in bracket 2 and possibly bracket 3. Next up is a spicy mono-red commander in Avatar Roku Firebender. And he says that whenever a player attacks, add 6 red mana. He also has an ability that costs 3 red mana and gives a creature +3/+0 until the end of the turn. I think getting 6 red mana anytime anyone attacks is a very cool ability, and I love cards that change the dynamics of a game like this. We can then use that mana proactively to cast something like an Unexpected Windfall, or we can use it defensively, casting something like a Fault Line if someone decides to attack us. Or we can just use that mana to progress the game state by giving a creature +6 power. I think there's a really fun combat-focused red deck here that makes the combat phase much more interesting than it otherwise would be. And I could see Roku being a great commander in bracket 2 and possibly in bracket 3 where combat and turning creatures sideways is often still a key way that games are decided. From Mono Red to Simic, let's talk about Drunith, Reviver of the Hive. Druidith is a 2-mana commander that says whenever we cast the creature spell with mana value equal to their power, we copy that spell, except the copy isn't legendary, and then we put a 1/1 counter on Druidith. As I've said multiple times already, copying things is broken, and copying legendary things is even more broken, because they weren't really designed to be copied. Whether we pump up Druidith to copy big scary creatures, or we cast consecutively bigger and bigger creatures getting copies as we go, Druidith is a whole lot of fun. Like finding out that Mana Dorks and Intruder Alarm do some truly silly things with Druidith. But that's very much an oh my god guys, we broke Intruder Alarm moment. I think Druidith is best placed as a very fun and casual bracket 2 deck. I ended up building an all-creature tempo control deck using Druidith as the commander as part of a budget deck building challenge with my friends earlier this year. And that was a whole heap of fun, both in trying to get the most out of Druidith, but also in trying to make tempo work as a strategy in Commander. And that's probably a video I'll make sometime next year. Similar to Fleem, Druidith is a digital printing, with Jackal being the paper printing, but I will certainly be proxying this one. Next up is Toph the First Metal Bender. She is a Naya commander that turns all of our non-token artifacts into lands. At the beginning of our end step, we Earthbend too. So basically target land becomes a creature with 2 1/1 counters on it, and most importantly, when it dies or is exiled, we return it to the battlefield tapped. A card like Toph the Tinkers with permanent types often enables really broken things, and in this case, we get to abuse artifacts, enters, or leave abilities, like the humble Ica or Mycosynth Wellspring. Drawing a card from playing Ica Wellspring, and then having it die and drawing another card, and then drawing another card when it returns to the battlefield and repeating that is pretty damn good. But while good, that's still pretty fair. What about doing that with a Stasis Coffin? The One Ring could never. Now pair this with a Sacrifice Outlet, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Toph is playable in bracket 2 all the way up to higher power. And we're on to the second last commander in my list in Golbear's Crystal Collector. He's a Dimir artifact commander and says that we surveil whenever an artifact enters under our control. Then at the end of the turn, if we control enough artifacts, we can return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. And if we meet a further artifact requirement, we can have opponents lose life equal to that creature's power. Now this is probably partly because I love artifacts and I love graveyard shenanigans, but having an enhanced surveillance in play, and then playing a cryogen relic that lets you surveil 3 and draw a card is pretty damn good. And if we play something like Matoya, we just push that into overdrive. My personal win condition of choice is filling our graveyard and then showing the table an Apocalypse Demon and watching the color drain from their faces. What a banger. And that art, man, so cool. Golbears can be played at any power level and in multiple ways. From controlled focus lists recurring smaller creatures to ones that recur highly suggested creatures like a Filigree Attendant, or in my case, an Apocalypse Demon, all the way to full-blown CDH combo lists that are aiming to win the game on turn 3. Those that watched my Golbears video will know that I didn't really respect his game at first. I thought he was one-dimensional and a little bit bland. That initial take caused a bit of ruckus in my comments, and as all of us should be, I was open to taking on new information and changing my perspective, so I challenged myself to build him in an interesting way and made a video about the process. I still think he's fairly one-dimensional in his core game plan, but now I think he's much more interesting and much more fun to play. Last but definitely not least, we have Ragos Deaf Gastronaut. Magic's first ever Lobster Citizen is a banger of a Boros guy that turns all of our artifacts into foods. We can then also pay 1 mana and tap him, and sacrifice a food to deal 3 damage to each opponent. At the beginning of each end step, if we gain life this turn, we get to untap him. Other than the fact that it looks like this shrimp would fit right in on the Bharati in One Piece, he makes for a very interesting Boros artifact commander. Given he deals 3 damage to each of our opponents, he deals 9 damage in total. If we give him lifelink, that means we gain 9 life per activation, and because we gained life, he untaps at the end of the end step, meaning we could do 12 or more damage per turn cycle and gain 3 times that much life, as long as we have artifact fodder ready to sacrifice. Give this shrimp a cola vending machine and then you're really cooking. I think Ragos really shines in bracket 2 and bracket 3. I really loved Edge of Eternities as a set this year, and Ragos was the commander I was most excited to build, which is why I made a video all about him. In the midst of making that video, I pulled an alt art of him out of the final pack that I opened, so it was truly meant to be. I know there are a ton of other great commanders that I didn't talk about, so let me and your fellow Frogers know in the comments what your favorite commander of the year was and why. I've also linked a shortlist in the description to all the commanders that I considered before narrowing it down to this list. Start off 2026 strong by coming to hat in the best commander community on the internet in the base deck department Discord, and last but not least, a reminder that if you want more of me, you can find that on Patreon, or if you want me to help you fix or build a deck from scratch, I offer that over on Coffee. And with that, my year of making Magic videos is over. I'll post something more reflective closer to the new year, but I'd like to say a quick thank you to you for watching, liking, and yapping in the comments along with me. I didn't really set out to be a creator or an influencer, and I simply make videos to share the excitement that I have for this game and to help others get better at the game so that you can enjoy it even more. And I'm glad that through that, I found you. So again, as always, thank you for being here. And here are 2 videos you may have missed this year that are probably worth your time. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.